Hey, hello, everybody. Hey, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We're just going to wait another minute or two while we've got a bunch of people coming in. For today's webinar, myself, I'm Tia Lofsgaard. I'm the Executive Director here at the Canada Organic Trade Association. We are going to have this as a fully bilingual webinar. So apologies for anybody who had to do a double registration, which is why I'm giving a little bit more time for people to come into the room. In order for us to have the translation feature on the slides, we realized there was a double registration process. And let's see, I think we can probably get started. We got a nice crew here. We are recording this webinar here today, and I know a lot of people registered for it, and we'll probably be sending this out likely by tomorrow when we get the recording, and we'll send out a copy of the slides. So we've got all of that covered to meet your needs. I'd like to introduce also Maylene Bosch. She's our Government Relations and Regulatory Affairs Manager. There she is. And she's going to be working in the background with me, working through all of the questions and answers. We aim to go with about 40 minutes. So park your questions in either the chat or the Q&A. We're good with either option. And she will join us for one moment to learn on how to do the translation. But first, I just wanted to do our acknowledgement that we are located here in Ottawa on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here has been back to the time immemorial. So I will pass it over now to Maylene, who will guide you through how to work with the translation of the slide feature.
Bonjour et bienvenue à notre webinaire. En fait, aujourd'hui, on utilise la fonctionnalité de Microsoft Teams pour pouvoir faire la traduction automatique des diapositives. Ceci, en fait, c'est pas une traduction parfaite. Alors, on va envoyer une traduction officielle après, peut-être dans une semaine, quelque chose comme ça, pour que vous puissiez voir la traduction exacte de la présentation aujourd'hui. En fait, pour aujourd'hui, ce que vous pouvez faire, c'est pour avoir la traduction des diapositives, c'est cliquer sur les 3 points au bas de votre écran. Puis ensuite, cliquez sur Traduire les diapositives. Après, vous sélectionnez la langue dans laquelle vous souhaitez voir les diapositives. Et comme ça serait affiché des diapositives dans la langue que vous avez choisie. Et vous pouvez faire, en fait, changer encore après à la langue originelle ou n'importe quelle langue que vous voulez. Merci et bon webinaire.
Great. Thank you, Maylene. So today's agenda is been a difficult one to plan. We've been wanting to do a webinar for a couple weeks, but everything just keeps changing. And probably right now, something is changing if we were to read the news. So bear with us. Some of the information that we're giving, of course, is very timely and will not change. And then other aspects of the numbers that we provided here could possibly change. So I'll try to point those out as I go through. Our focus is exclusively on organic. There's a lot of other information out there, and of course, organic is part of the larger industry that's affected. But what we want to focus on today is specifically some organic data to help give you a bit of insights in regards to our analysis of how this is affecting trade, and also possible other markets and opportunities for you to diversify, as well as get some supports that the government has been coming up with. So our focus will be on the US tariffs, mostly for much of this presentation, but we cannot ignore that we also have the China tariffs, which are impacting one of our product categories extremely in a tough way. And then, of course, we will do our Q&A at the end. We'll stop recording at that point, so you can feel free. Like I mentioned, just put your questions as they come up in the Q&A or in the chat window, and Maylene will facilitate the discussion. Just because we have so many people on the line, we are keeping all microphones and videos off. Not that we don't want to see you, it just gets unruly with this amount of people. And of course, we will be sharing the slides because you will note on the slides there are hyperlinks to many of the resources that we have. So stay tuned as we do that. And then, of course, there is the disclaimer that, of course, the information that we are giving you is something that you should always double, triple check. There's so many product categories that are covered under organic that we're able to kind of go down deep into specific product categories if we've had an inquiry about it already that we've been dealing with it at CODA, but there's no way that we can ever really cover every single product category. So many things are going to be broad in scope. We are here, of course, to facilitate deeper dives. Of course, we are a membership-based association located here in Ottawa. So we do offer that service in the deeper dives with our clients and members. If you're not yet a CODA member, feel free to join us at any point in time. But I'll just kick it off with when this all started and just go broad for a moment. On February 1st, of course, the US announced tariffs on Canada, and they did that under the premise of an act called the International Emergencies Economics Powers Act, and I will just refer to that as IEPA. See, when we are charting out sort of the communications that we've been doing, there are two separate acts that have come out. We've got the IEPA and a bunch of tariffs, that the retaliatory tariffs that are related to that. And you'll see on the next slide that then there was reciprocal tariffs. It's a separate act. So I just want to make that point. We have been doing a lot of communication all on our public webpage. So if you want to kind of get the history and all the communications that we've been putting out over time, there's a dedicated webpage, and the URL there is there. It's canada-organic.ca. Moving on to the next slide is a bit of a timeline. So obviously it's been quite chaotic since that February 1st IEPA Act was put down in place, where it was first announced that 25% tariffs. Oh, is anybody having a problem seeing the slides? Can my colleagues see the slides as I cycle through? Maylene or
Yes.
Sophie?
Yeah.
Yes.
They look
Okay.
good.
Okay. Super. Okay. Just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page. So in February, of course, was the 25% tariffs, all Canadian exports coming into the United States. That was set to start on March 4th. And then that March 4th date came, and our Canadian government retaliated by putting tariffs on Canadian or US products coming into Canada on $30 billion worth of goods. And we'll be referring to that list of the 30 billion as list 1. Then lots of other things happened, but 2 days later, it basically a modification was made on March 6th that the 25% tariff will not be on all Canadian products going to the United States. It would actually only be on non-CUSMA compliant, which I will define in a moment. Canada, US, Mexico agreement is what CUSMA stands for. And the 10% tariff on energy and potash was outlined. Then we've got additional ones that are up on tariff and steel and a retaliatory tariff that happened. I'm not going to focus on that because most of the focus is going to be on food and agricultural trade here. But of course, we recognize that many manufacturers will be impacted by those tariffs, whether it's on your packaging or on your equipment. So just putting it there, parking it there. And then on April 5th was the next big moment in time where reciprocal tariffs were put on by the US for many, many, many other countries. And originally, of course, there was quite a deeper tariff rate applied to, I believe there's 185 countries that were impacted, but then that was also changed to now be a 10% tariff, but it's on pause for 90 days. And of course, we don't know what will happen in that time. There's a lot of negotiations happening all around, but the reason we're putting that specific one on all the other countries is there's many companies in Canada that are bringing in manufactured goods in other countries that are destined either for Canada and the US, and a lot of cross-border trade happening there. And so we've received actually even more phone calls since that April 5th announcement came out. So let's move on to the next thing. Oh, it was list one, as I mentioned. It was for $30 billion worth of imports. This was the retaliatory tariffs that Canada put in place. And immediately, there was a lot of phone calls and meetings that our association was invited to, of course, to not only inform us and answer questions, but also to give our feedback in regards to how this was going to be affecting Canadian exporters. So I was invited as, of course, as representative of the organic sector. And of course, we always are concerned about prices ever going higher on Canadian goods. We specifically have way more concerns about the products that were going to be going to the United States, because initially it was absolutely everything was going to have a 25% tariff. But what ended up happening was, of course, when they pulled back on March 6th and said that there was only going to be a 25% tariff on non-CUSMA, which is the origin claim being made either in Canada, Mexico, or the United States, that we started doing some analysis to really look at, okay, what amount of impact will happen on our exports now with all that's happened, and with the retaliatory tariffs that Canada had put into place. It was really a question of, were a lot of organic products going to be impacted? And of course, what we have data on, we're going to show you in regards to, there was 4,700 organic HS codes on this list, of course, and 65 of them we have organic data on. So this is where we were really looking at, okay, what's going to be happening with the prices of yogurt, tomatoes, beans, citrus, watermelon, peaches, coffee, tea, spices, cereals, and some beverages. So, and then that list too, we'll get to in a second, but this has been something that's been discussed from the minister's office for quite some time, that maybe 30 billion would expand to another a full 200 billion. And the reason for that was that, we're really trying to negotiate, of course, but they were going to give time for industry to actually give feedback of everything that was on that list too, and whether it actually would be, to our detriment as Canadian industries to actually put tariffs on that in place. So currently not in effect, and we'll keep going. So let's go into what it does. The CUSMA compliance, which got put in place on March 6th. What it is you've got kind of two big categories. So any product that is grown, say like a crop, that is actually grown either in US, Mexico, or Canada, that meets the rule of origin. And so that would qualify to be able to be exported without the tariffs. And then there's a second category, which is very product specific. And this would come more into packaged goods that are manufactured. And so it would have to have a minimum amount of North American content, and that transformation of that imported good. So let's say it's like a sugar containing product. We're not growing the organic cane sugar here in Canada. If it has enough Canadian content in it, and that varies by product category, sometimes 60, sometimes 75%, you would need to look at your specific category. If it results in a new HS classification, so it's no longer just sugar, it's now a granola bar or what have you. So those are the sort of two criteria. And again, that there's specific process transformation. Now, one of the things that I want to mention there is that on our organic equivalencies, our definitions of transformation do not match. And later in the presentation, we're going to get into an example on coffee. So this is something that, we're speaking right now in regards to what is the methodology to try and avoid tariffs exporting to the United States. But it's not always the same way that we've thought about it as an organic sector. And many of the product categories, such as like maple syrup or oats or wheat, like we have already had this status in regards to being the most favored nation treatment in regards to the tariff codes. Of course, what's happened is that the most favored nations has not been mentioned anywhere in the Tariff Act that the US has put on. So traders now would need to choose the CUSMA preferential treatment. So this is pretty much a matter of paperwork, getting it put down in place, but you do need to get a certification of origin to be completed. And you do need to, of course, keep your records for 5 years for supporting documentation. So this is a really important thing because it will exempt your product if you qualify under all of these criteria, and you can learn more on that link to be able to try and exempt yourself. So I certainly know that before the big tariffs were announced on Liberation Day, which is April 2nd, to the other trading nations selling into the United States, there was a moment there where all of a sudden Canada was looking like they were in like a very good position because they were only at exempt with the CUSMA on certain product categories and 25% for others. So things have changed now, of course, because now there's a 90-day pause on other countries selling into the United States with a 10%. We still have 25%, us and Mexico, on non-CUSMA compliant product. So it really depends on your product category of whether we're in an advantageous position or a disadvantageous position. So let's go into what we have data on for organic. And anybody who's seen a presentation by me I'm always talking about how we do not have very good data in Canada. And I am happy to say there will be more organic data coming, but we're not at a place as of this webinar where we have all the import data. So for us to really look at the effect of the retaliatory tariffs that the Canadian government put in place, we had data available on 21 products where we actually had harmonized sales codes, or otherwise called as HS codes. And these are the products where we could actually do some analysis and then try to do some estimations on what it would look like on the tariffs coming in. So I'll just switch to the next slide. As we extrapolated from the 21 HS codes that we actually had data, you could see that if you apply 25% tariff on the annual data that you got and you broke it out, we would be paying about 1.433 billion in regards to, or the US would be paying, and we would be collecting as a Canadian government 1.433, but we did an extraction and put it down across the 65 product categories in which we don't. So it looks like Canada would be very much collecting around $4.299 billion in regards to the retaliatory tariffs. And of course, we still have this list 2 hanging around of whether the Canadian government may look at putting more tariffs in place. There was a consultation that was open to industry up until April 2nd. We did poll our members to find out if there was any specific feedback to try and understand. We didn't get a lot in regards to that, but I think the general feeling by Canadians is we do not want our prices to go up in Canada, of course, and particularly with organic being a premium product. That is something that we have really made the point to our Canadian government that organic's just a little bit different. Like if you lose your Canadian market, or if you lose any market and the farmers are no longer incentivized to sell at an organic premium, and they leave organic, then we're going to have that loss for 3 years. So there's a long-term ramifications to the sector that I think we've been pretty good at pointing out to the Canadian government, to just be careful on not forgetting about organic when there are negotiations, and making sure that we are considerate of that price premium and how far Canadians would go in order to purchase. So there's 384 organic codes that are on that next list. So the original list that we've got was fairly limited. If that list 2, as they've published it, which they may change what's on there, if that does go into effect, we would have 384 products total as organic that would be additionally affected. And, there's been quite a response, of course, by retailers and Canadians, just really backing Canadian products, where everybody now we're seeing made in Canada. I can't tell you how many people are calling us to try and find what are the organic lettuce situations going on in Canada. And so we're seeing much more kind of signage really indicating what is Canada and Canada Organic. And I've seen even on some of the message boards, etc., talking about the Canada Organic logo, and does this mean it's Canadian? Well, it doesn't. Of course, it means that the product is compliant to the Canada Organic regime, but you need to look at if it's made in Canada or a product of Canada, and the actual details that are written out on each one of the packaging. And just to highlight that, we've had conversations with distributors who were grabbing all their products and throwing a 25% on. And we're like, okay, hold on. There's only so many retaliatory tariffs that are being put in place so far. That is not to say that companies might need to push through price increases due to other inflationary factors or what have you, the general economy and what's happening on the pricing of products going crazy with this new economic order that seems to be really disruptive. But some retailers are accepting those price increases, passing them through to the consumer and actually indicating it, like you can see with the little T tariff sign. And they have made commitments to actually remove the tariff increase if the tariffs go away. So it's been a big shuffle for all the retailers. I'm sure each one of you as brands have had to evaluate your pricing strategy, and I'm sure you're all experiencing different things. So we'd be interested to hear more in regards to how that's affecting your company. Now I'm going to go into the data that is actually way better than Canada's. It is the Canadian export data to the United States. As the United States, the National Organic Program moved ahead with their Strengthening Organic Integrity Enforcement Bill this year. For every time that there's a product exported to the United States, there's actually a no-pick. It's the National Organic Program import certificate generated by the certifiers that actually indicates the volume and by sales, which gives us very good concrete data. So this is an estimation done by our U.S. partners down in the United States, the Organic Trade Association, and we've just simply done our own analysis where we can see what are the top product categories and which products would likely be CUSMA compliant and which ones likely would not be CUSMA compliant. And of course, this is very general, but it's as good as we got, especially when you can see that 478 billion of it there is actually not, or 478 million, I'm sorry, is not broken down. And I'd love to get more detail, but this is as good as it got right now. So when we did this exercise, we were like, okay, how much tariffs would actually be going and how much does this CUSMA compliant really help Canadian companies? It looks like around 45% probably do not qualify for the CUSMA. And in the meetings that we've had with government, they've also mentioned a similar number between 50 to 55% of Canadian trade to the United States likely does not qualify. So we're actually in the ballpark through our quick estimation there. And here's the amount that we would imagine as being a monthly impact. So if we actually take the amount that the US would be collecting, they would be collecting around $23 million on a monthly basis, simply on organic products alone. So it's the best carve out that we've been able to see. And I'll just move on in regards to really, this is more now evaluating, we know that the US is our number one export market. We also are their number one export market, but they are way less reliant on international exports than we are. We are very, very, very dependent on our export markets overseas. We do a lot of processing that is, or we don't do enough processing. We have a lot of raw commodities, and that's where you're going to find that the bulk of our products are coming from in Canada that make up the big dollar values. So I think it's really important for us to keep in mind that our situation for organic trade is limited. We have to have an equivalency in place in order to reduce the administrative and cost burdens to operators. And our number one market for organic is right across the border. So you can see though that the US, they really only export about 3.2 billion out of a 70 billion market. It's 5%, right? So they don't feel like it's not something that is as detrimental to them in regards to our reciprocal tariffs. And you can see through the numbers, we're not collecting, I think we're collecting 1/5 of what they'll be making in tariffs. Excuse me. The global organic system, called the Global Organic Trade System in the United States, that is also based off of HS code data that the US collects. I have taken a snapshot of that. We will be monitoring that over time just to see if we're actually experiencing a decline in US exports. But you can see just from the statement there that only about 50% of trade is captured. And I would say in Canada, with the data that we have available from the government, it's even less. So we're really going to be relying on our trade partnerships where we could get better no-pick data from OTA or what have you to be able to make sure that we're really looking at real data, not data that's so limited in scope that it doesn't actually help us very much. So this was based off of the April 2nd announcements when there were crazy high tariffs put on many different nations around the world, 185 different nations. So the next couple slides that I'm providing are actually based off of the higher amount. Since we put together our slides, there has been a reduction now to it being 10% for all countries, except for Mexico, Canada, and China, which are unique and have their own criteria. But this is really based off of that analysis on April 2nd and what product categories were going to be getting very much affected by the tariffs being sold into the United States. So I'm providing this level of detail. I won't spend time on them. We'll be sending out the slides later. But you can see that besides, they took out kind of the three unique outliers, Canada, Mexico, and China. And these are the next countries that are very much being impacted, of course, with the tariffs. The European Union and the Peru, Tunisia, Ecuador, New Zealand, Indonesia, Brazil. So the reason I'm showing this is because we have had clients call us up and say, we actually, manufacture in India or in Italy or in where have you. So we wanted to give you some insights in regards to the impact of products not actually produced in Canada that might be manufactured by Canadian companies going directly into the United States. And these are the top impacted US product categories that they have deduced. Again, the cost of the tariffs you can disregard right now, but I think the analysis would pretty much be very, very similar. So I think we'll go with that. Again, this could be put in place because right now we're paused for 90 days, but if the pause comes off, these are going to be the exact product categories to be aware of. So you can see it's everything that's kind of grown in countries outside of Canada, besides things like blueberries. We do have a lot of soybean meal and cake coming through Canada as well, and soybeans. But many of these other product categories are really grown outside of Canada and international environments. And the produce category. So exclude, Canada and Mexico was excluded from this analysis because we, if it's grown in Canada or the US or Mexico, sorry, it's actually exempt. So in this category, Canadians could possibly be more beneficial to sell into the United States. They now have the advantage, at least for the next 90 days, and we'll see what happens. But you can see that at least every other country is going to have at least 10%. And if you're a Canadian fruit or vegetable processor, you will be exempt through the CUSMA rule of origin. Sweeteners, a lot of trade between Canada and the US in regards to sweeteners. So you can see that, the analysis by OTA is that they might feel that the price pressures happening on imported sweeteners may push people to consider other options where there would not be as high of a tariff. So agave syrup, perhaps made in Mexico, or another type of rice syrup or what have you that could be manufactured in Canada or Mexico. And grains, of course, we're very happy that grains are not going to be subject to the 25% due to the CUSMA rules for Canada, but you can see that it's really going to affect rice and other imported wheat and barley and oats coming in from other jurisdictions besides Canada and Mexico. Coffee and tea. Coffee and tea are on the retaliatory list that Canada had put in place. So we're really feeling like coffee and tea are going to be out for quite a ride in the next little while here, because not only is it being tariffed going into the United States, it's also being tariffed coming to Canada. And we certainly do have a lot of trade out of these. I have analyzed, and maybe I should have put this slide in, but if you're interested in working in the coffee sector, I have looked at the green beans versus the roasted coffee and done a bit more of an analysis on that. So if you're interested, please reach out to me. I'll move on to feedstuffs, and I got quite a few slides here on feedstuffs, but soybean on the original NOPIC data is grouped together, and it represents the 5th largest export from Canada to the United States. Their data combines food grade and feed stuff on soybean in one big category. But you can see that there's quite a lot of feedstuffs that are they themselves cannot do the impact analysis very well, because it's hard to say if the product being traded through Canada is simply here, milled, and exported, then it would not qualify for the 25% exemption. But if it is Canadian grown, then of course it would. So it's hard to say where those numbers go. And you can see that I've circled Canada there, but you can see where they're saying that the most feed stuff is coming from. Of course, Russia, Mexico, and Canada, it says, stands to benefit because other regions, this is when we had the super high tariff list in place, which would be happening again in less than 90 days if it comes off pause. But right now, these numbers are a little bit different because everybody's at the 10%. I'll just highlight again that we've got data in regards to the soybean meal and cake. And you can see that the #1 import going into the US is from Togo, Nigeria, Turkey, Benin, etc. And on organic soybeans, so this is on specifically soybeans, not soy meal, and cake, that Argentina, Turkey, Ghana, Togo, again, are at the top. And there's Canada's ranking. Excuse me. The feedstuffs, of course, this is yellow corn, and you can see that Canada's quite a big player on the feedstuffs compared to many of the other regions. So it really depends on if it's Canadian grown and processed or whether it's imported and traded. Okay, I'm going to switch gears and try to get us to our question period very shortly. China. Of course, on March 8th, China also announced that effective on March 20th, there would be some tariffs put in place, and this was in response to Canada having tariffs in place on Chinese electrical vehicles, steel, aluminum. And that was introduced months and months ago, last fall. So this was where they really looked to be doing 100% tariffs on certain product categories. And I'll move over to my next slide. There's 8 product categories that they put the 100% tariff on and 25% tariff on a variety of other things. What's really, really affecting Canada right now on the organic side is the dried peas. We are a major provider of Canadian organic peas selling into China. And much of that also even is processed in China under the National Organic Programs and then shipped back to the United States. So that is going to be very difficult. We have spoken with many traders that are very challenged by this. we have reached out in regards to the 25% tariffs on the 49 fish, seafood, and 15 pork products, just to find out if any of our members are affected. We do not believe that there are separate organic HS codes identifying organic trade into China on the Chinese side, but in Canada, we do have some organic export codes. So this is where I'm going to go right now, where we did a deeper dive because people are very much going to be losing their yellow pea market in China. So just to kind of give you a sense of scale, 70%, around 70% of all of Canada's sales to any market in the world is going to China. So these are based off of sales figures in Canadian dollars, and you can see out of our total amount of Canadian sales that is quite a large amount that's going over to China. And who's going to be affected? It's going to be producers in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC used to do a little bit of trade, but they do not any longer. So this is where emergency supports are likely going to have to be put in place for Saskatchewan and Alberta producers. And I do know that we have some of our trade officials on the call here today. So we'll get to the point where we give you recommendations on how to put in an application to get some support, but you absolutely, we can understand that you are very much affected by that. And here's just the same analysis, but broken out by a kg volume, where we did have data that I wanted to be able to present to you. And so the effect, of course, of these Chinese tariffs, specifically on the yellow peas, it's doubling the price. And China would receive about 2.1 million in tariffs on yellow peas from Canada. And that is if the sales continue. So we'll be continuing to monitor this. We do get we get HS code data, but it's unfortunately not timely. I'm going to see if we can get the data out of the system any earlier, but you basically have to let the sales period close and then wait to evaluate. So the other question we're getting is how can we diversify? What are there opportunities for other crops that, you know, might replace my yellow pea sales? Of course, we're coming right upon planting season, so we're working as fast as we can with all of you. We do have some good data and we have some good market analysis, so please reach out to us. We are concerned certainly about the longer term implications because, you know, I've heard from many of the pea exporters, this is not a matter of you know, being able to wait for months. This is a matter of a month and then not having your market because you're having other actors move in. Of course, the quality in Canada is great, but if the price is not right, they're going to start searching for other more local options. You're going to see others that can respond to the opportunity to grow. So this is where we need to act fast. And so we've put together an alternative market just based off of HS code data. Of course, this is based off of only about 30% of the volume that is generally sold. But just to give you a sense, you know, we've got this table is not including China or the US. I've got a separate chart on the US next, but that India, Thailand, Sri Lanka are actual possible places that you could divert some of your sales efforts to. And yellow pea sales to Canada, it's not a huge volume. Oh, so this is going into the US. Of course, there is no tariffs on yellow peas going into the US. So perhaps this is going to present a new opportunity where you don't need to go to China to process it to come back into the United States. So hopefully we're going to have some opportunities that abound out of that opportunity. You never know. Maybe some things are a crisis, but maybe in the long term it could be a positive redirection. And then we're going to just change, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because we've got it all on our website and we've got the links here, but everybody needs to know how can we be helped. So one of the things that I want to mention is that the remission process is a process that is specifically for Canadian companies that are impacted by Canada's retaliatory tariffs. So that would be limited to everything that's on list one, and there's 65 organic products that we've seen that are on there. So that is a process that involves paperwork, and it's to get back any tariffs that you did have to pay on. You can go through the remission process. to try and get those duties reimbursed to you. It is a timely process, and they did say, of course, they're going to try and work through them as quickly as possible, but please put in your application soon. The email address is there, and there is a hyperlink in regards to how to do that, just following the paperwork process on the website. Now, for the duty drawback. Now, this is for companies that are importing products into Canada that have retaliatory tariffs imposed as a result of the US tariffs. So it means that it's a bit complicated, this one. So you can get a refund of up to 99% of duties paid on imported goods that are later exported or destroyed. So an example of that is a product that maybe lands in the United States, or it lands in Canada, and you had to pay a tariff on it. I think mostly it's like if it lands in the United States, it had to pay a tariff to come in. It's going to come up to Canada, it's going to get processed and then go back in. There's a process there where you can actually, if it's not actually going to be sold in that region, it doesn't need to be paying the tariffs. I don't think I've explained that properly. We'll probably come back to that on the questions. But I'm going to give you an example on the next slide, and you'll see, but there is types of eligible drawback. There's unused merchandise, so it's exported without being used in the United States, or it's imported goods that's used in a product that's later exported, or it's items that are defective, non-compliant, or not as ordered. So that's the terms, and you'd need to talk to your customs broker about that and try and make sure that you would qualify. Let's move on to just the last thing. We've got lots of loans in place. A lot of people are telling me loans are not good enough. We need sort of more like a CERB model where we get immediate money. So this is the difficult thing, is this is what's been offered. We got Business Development Canada, Farm Credit Canada. We've got other programs like Export Development Canada that helps you on maybe perhaps diversifying in your market. But the only big one that I'd say is I mean, obviously cash flow is important, and that might suit a lot of people's needs. But the EI program that they put in place for work sharing helps companies that immediately look to need to do layoffs. You can do a work sharing. You need to have a minimum of 2 eligible employees, and your company needs to have been operating at least for 1 year. The work sharing program needs to be in place for a minimum of 6 weeks and up to 76 weeks. And you need to prove that you've had less than a 10% decrease in work activity in the last 6 weeks. And this program, it applies, of course, during the time frame that I mentioned. From March 7th it started, and you can get the funding up until March 6th, 2026. And it applies for not-for-profits, charities, small, medium, large businesses. And there may also be some GST relief announcements that might help your company depending on where you're at on paying your GST. So there are lots of supports that are coming and being developed by different provinces. I won't go into them, but you can see there, look at your specific province and know that things are in development. So even to try and explain them all, it's not worth our while, because things are still they're in flux or they're coming. So just keep your eye on the web pages that we've provided in order to give an overview of what you may qualify at a provincial level. And lastly, we got to end on a good note. There are lots of opportunities, of course, to diversify markets and increase your production in Canada. We're looking for some shining star to really say, like, this is very, very we don't want this to be a complete disaster. There's got to be some shining lights here. And we have got equivalencies with the Indo-Pacific region. It is set to grow to 95 billion by 2029, which is doubling the size. So there are a lot of people wanting products. We've got now equivalencies in place for Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea. And we work a lot on this export side, so please reach out to us. We've got missions, we've got B2B matchings, we've got all sorts of connections and market analysis on those different market opportunities. And Europe, we've been a great partner with them for years. We're the 20th largest trade partner already. But also just to say that, of course, with Brexit, we've got UK also included. and Switzerland and the European Union. We're just about to renew our equivalency with the European Union at the end of this year. So there is, there is lots of opportunities out there. I know it's not right there and it doesn't have all the benefits that we've experienced through our trade relationship with the United States, but it's always good to have a diverse market portfolio. So we're here to help. And then lastly, just to say, we've talked to Canadian companies that didn't think they had an opportunity to produce in Canada. They had to go and find it perhaps in Europe or another nation. That now there may be more supports in place to actually facilitate value-added production here in Canada. So let's work together. We'll try to make sure that we've got a positive outlook for the organic system moving forward. And I will leave it there.